Luka Magnotta is a Canadian murderer who in 2012 murdered 33-year-old Jun Lin, an undergraduate at Concordia University who had been in the country for less than 2 years, having come to Canada for a fresh start and better opportunities. This crime was particularly heinous, as Magnotta filmed himself dismembering the corpse of Jun. The video showing this was uploaded to the internet, titled "One Lunatic, One Ice Pick." He then mailed parts of Jun's body to political parties and schools across Canada before fleeing the country. This horrific crime was planned, with Magnotta promoting the video he was going to release days before the murder. This was all part of his lifelong obsession with gaining attention. He decided to do this by committing acts of unbelievable cruelty, which began with him uploading videos of him drowning and suffocating cats, before escalating to murdering another human being. When he was eventually caught, over 4,000 miles away in Germany, he was Googling himself, a perfect example of the remorseless, vain, narcissistic psychopath he is, whose sole focus in life was self-promotion. Welcome to Evil Among Us. This case comes with a warning, as I'll talk about graphic acts of violence, as well as animal abuse, so please, if this would disturb you, end the video now. Also, this case is like going down a rabbit hole. Luka Magnotta's life was a catalogue of lies, and it's very difficult in some cases to tell fact from fiction, although some things he's claimed are easily refutable. On other occasions, he's made very specific statements and then completely refuted them later. The lies he's told and the reasons why are all part of understanding the disturbed man he is, but if I'm presenting something as fact, I'll endeavour to have corroborated the information to the best of my ability. The man now known as Luka Magnotta was born Eric Clinton Kirk Newman on July the 24th, 1982, in Scarborough, a district of Toronto, in the province of Ontario, in Canada. He was the first child of Anna Yorkin and Donald Newman, who met when he was in the 10th grade, so when he was around 15 or 16 years old, and she was a year younger. At the age of 16, Anna became pregnant and dropped out of school. The pair would go on to have 2 further children, a boy and a girl. Both parents were ill-equipped to raise a child, not just because of their youth, but they both had significant issues, including problems with alcohol and mental health difficulties. Magnotta's statements about his childhood vary wildly, and demonstrate, as I alluded to earlier, that he's a pathological liar. In an interview for a report for his murder trial, Magnotta claims his mother Anna was obsessed with cleanliness and that she was a germaphobe who would frequently force children to wash their hands to the point where it would start to cause skin irritation. He was described as locking him and his siblings out of the house at night, and they should also leave the children's pet rabbits outside to freeze to death in the winter. He claimed that when he was around 6 years old, he had issues with bedwetting, and so his mother made him wear nappies to bed. He also said that his mother would tie his younger brother to a chair when he misbehaved. However, in around 2017, he told an author writing a book on him that he and his mother had a good relationship, and that, quote, "The media is constantly trying to rewrite my history, life and story to fit their sensationalist narrative. I was a very happy child, particularly before the age of 11, always very inquisitive and asking lots of questions." Lastly, in 2020, he told a journalist, quote, "Something most people would be surprised with is the following. My idiotic mother wrote a book recently claiming to have a close relationship with me. I despise this woman. I have zero contact with her, and everything she says is false. A con artist and an animal abuser herself, who uses me to collect money. Zero relationship." And this is the epitome of Luka Magnotta. He will literally say things and his own words printed, and will then deny what he says later. In these situations, I think it's important to look for third-party corroboration. This appears to come from an aunt of Magnotta's, who gave interviews with the press in 2012, but did not wish to be named, in which she stated, quote, "This family, from the head down, is very dysfunctional. The essence of this whole story is parenting, or the lack of." This is at the heart of this case. Magnotta's childhood appears, from information which is available, and verifiable to have been characterised by extreme neglect, physical and emotional abuse, and repeated exposure to mental illness in one form or another. As a starting point, Magnotta's father Donald does not appear to have been abusive to his son, but he did suffer from paranoid schizophrenia and alcoholism, and whilst this was diagnosed, he began treatment in 1994. Prior to this point, and around the children, he would often drink himself into a stupor in order to drown out the voices he heard in his head. Unfortunately, due to this condition, Donald was not there as an emotional support for any of the children, or to counter the behaviour of Anna, who in court, Donald described as a domineering and cruel woman, someone who was not interested in taking care of the children, but rather, quote, she wanted to have total control over them. This included Anna apparently trying to poison the children's mind against their father, claiming that he would often threaten to kill them and her due to his schizophrenia, which doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that Anna was extremely good at deception. Lies appear to roll off her tongue, and she taught the children the mantra, why let the truth get in the way of a good lie. She too was a heavy drinker, who it does appear had a phobia of germs to the point where the children would wear face coverings around the house and would be forbidden from using public restrooms for fear of contamination. This also meant that all three siblings were forbidden from interacting with other children and going to school, all due to Anna's fear that she would become ill. Magnotta didn't actually attend school until he was in the 6th grade, with him being homeschooled during this time, meaning that he had spent around 11 years essentially confined to a home with mentally ill, alcoholic parents. He had no friends during this entire time. Eventually, but only due to pressure from his wider family, Magnotta was enrolled at IE Weldon Secondary School in the town of Lindsay in Ontario, and he immediately began to struggle. He was able to read and write, but teachers found that he had poor communication and language skills, little to no self-confidence, extremely poor self-esteem, and he seemed to struggle to express any emotions. He also had an extreme sensitivity to rejection. He tried to ingratiate himself with his classmates by telling lies. He would make outlandish claims about his family, being friends with celebrities, and owning a fishing boat, when in reality, the family were always in dire financial straits. Magnotta was described by one former classmate as, quote, a sad little kid, who was small, immature, and odd for his age. Magnotta's lies were his shield, his way of escaping from the horror that was his home life. However, his response when challenged could sometimes be violent. At age 12, when called out on his lies by a teacher, he threw a chair at them. Magnotta was marginalised throughout his school life. He doesn't appear to have had any real friends, and his absence, when he dropped out at age 16, was not noticed by anyone. Magnotta's school days were miserable, and this continued to characterise his home life. At the age of 13, the marriage between Anna and Dennis deteriorated, and they separated. Anna soon began a relationship with a man called Leo Bellinger. The children and Anna soon went to live with this man, who was described as physically and emotionally abusive. He specifically targeted Magnotta, who was quite effeminate as a teenager, and Leo called him a, quote, faggot, whilst he beat him. At age 16, Magnotta, in order to escape the abuse of Leo, moved in with his maternal grandmother, a woman called Phyllis Yorkin. However, it seems like this was out of the frying pan and into the fire. The same aunt I mentioned earlier stated, quote, the grandmother is very controlling, and if you have a submissive personality, she will do what she wants. Again, Magnotta was subjected to further homophobic slurs in this property, dominated by a woman who appeared to have no idea how to raise children. I've read through the upbringing of Eric Clinton Kirk Newman, later to become known as Luka Magnotta, and there is not a single shred of evidence of any form of caring or nurturing during his childhood. The crimes he went on to commit are unforgivable, and, as we'll get to later, his deliberate choice. No trauma in his own background excuses his actions. However, it's clear that his upbringing is what shaped him into the monster he became. As is common with children who grow up in a household of abuse, they find ways to escape from their environment, and Magnotta was no different, and this runs along two primary threads. Firstly, from a young age, he lost himself in films and film stars, and in particular, he began to idolise Marilyn Monroe. Magnotta felt a kinship with Marilyn. She had had a difficult childhood, growing up in care, and suffered abuse, but had turned into a beautiful woman who the world had adored, and she looked happy and radiant in her pictures. Magnotta later reported, quote, "When he was younger, he felt quite ugly, and when imagining himself being beautiful like her, he felt better." Magnotta convinced himself that fame equals happiness. Being surrounded by people taking your picture and paying attention to you somehow insulates you from the trauma of the past. He noted aspects of Marilyn Monroe that he wanted to replicate: her dyed hair, her name change, her cosmetic surgery, all things which in his mind meant she'd reinvented herself, things he could also do, which meant he could essentially kill off Eric Clinton Kirk Newman. He had several other idols, including James Dean, who he tried to emulate physically, but Marilyn Monroe appeared to resonate deeply with him. However, Magnotta was entirely focused on the superficial, the appearance of success, happiness and beauty, which doesn't hide the damage of years of trauma, which is all too well epitomised by the fate of his idol. The second type of escapism is a far more dangerous element that needs to be touched on. Unfortunately, Luka Magnotta is not only infamous as a killer of humans, but as an animal abuser, a man who enjoyed torturing and ending the lives of cats. He posted the first video showing this awful cruelty in 2010 when he was 27 years old, but it's noticeable this started long before this posting. We'll never know exactly when his behaviour began, but likely in childhood. As I've covered repeatedly on my channel, most of the most dangerous killers begin with animals. They all share a common trait: powerlessness. Abusing animals, having the power of life and death over them, was a way for them to feel in control of something in their lives, and I believe this was true of Luka Magnotta. Whilst we can only speculate about his abuse of animals, it's clear that Luka Magnotta was fascinated with acts of violence depicted in films. At a young age, he watched the film Basic Instinct, and this soon became his favourite film, mainly due to the opening scene where Sharon Stone's character brutally kills a man who's tied to a bed, stabbing him with an ice pick, including in the neck, chest and eye. This scene particularly was seared into Magnotta's brain and would inspire his horrific crime years later. So this is who Luka Magnotta was: a chronically neglected child who had been taught that lying was an appropriate way to behave, who had spent his life being dominated and controlled by people who were meant to love and protect him. He had no self-esteem or perception of self-worth and was utterly disconnected from the world, both in terms of struggling to even interact with those around him, but also, importantly, his lack of ability to show compassion for others or guilt for his actions. He had a fascination with murder, and, as an escape from his reality, he inevitably tortured animals, enjoying having power over living things. He was also creating a fantasy world where he believed that attention, money, and fame were all someone needed to be happy in life. Magnotta was a child, later a man, with a deep dark hole inside of him, which translated into a pathological need for attention, and his whole life was devoted to this one goal, which he would do absolutely anything to achieve. Any attention was good attention, even if this involved filming the abuse of animals, and later, the dismemberment of another human being. As a child, Magnotta began to replicate his idol Marilyn Monroe. He was fastidious about his appearance, and would frequently dye his hair either peroxide blonde or jet black. His changing physical appearance was a feature throughout his life, his attempt to reinvent himself. In around 2002 or 2003, so when he was aged 20 or 21, Magnotta began stripping at Remington's, a nightclub in Toronto. By 2003, he'd also appeared in his first porn film, pretending to be a straight man who was seduced by men. In 2004, he appeared in at least 2 more porn films as Jimmy, a name he would use on several occasions, including in 2005 when he appeared in Toronto's Fab magazine, a Canadian gay publication. I've little doubt that seeing his image published in a magazine and committed to film was hugely exciting to Magnotta, and, with his inflated sense of importance, he likely began ticking off his list of accomplishments, comparing them with Marilyn. Picture published in a magazine? Tick. Appearance in a film? Tick. He was well on his way. Unfortunately, the celebrity lifestyle required money, and in 2004, Magnotta befriended an extremely vulnerable 21-year-old woman who had the mental capacity of a 10-year-old child. He convinced her to apply for credit cards, which he then rinsed to the tune of $10,000, used to pay for luxuries for himself. He was arrested for fraud, but also on suspicion of sexually assaulting this woman whilst videoing this crime. The sexual assault charge was dropped, and in June 2005, Magnotta was given 12 months probation for the fraud. In addition, for money, Magnotta worked as a male escort. I think that this profession made him feel desired. Men were paying him for his services, and, in some twisted way, I believe he felt that this was giving him the attention and affection which he'd always strived for. It's important to note here that Magnotta claimed to have a rich client called Emmanuel Manny Lopez, who was apparently obsessed with him and who would stalk him. This name will come up again later, but you'll not be surprised to hear, given Magnotta's propensity for lying, he doesn't exist. Magnotta's homicidal fantasies were also starting to take form. In around 2002, he met a transgender woman called Nina Arsenault, with the pair having a brief relationship. Nina later described Magnotta as, quote, very manipulative and a pathological liar. Nina also feared Magnotta. His behaviour was unpredictable. He would make statements such as, quote, I'm afraid when you look in my eyes that you'll see there's nothing inside of me, before punching himself in the face, whilst the next minute, laughing and joking, saying that he wanted to kill people, including his family. He was also obsessed with serial killers and would talk about their crimes often. The next year, in 2006, Magnotta began another relationship with a transgender woman called Barbie, who later reported similar concerns about his behaviour. Barbie recalled Magnotta's vanity, describing his apartment as a shrine to himself, with wall-to-wall pictures of him, and that he repeatedly asked her to take more. Similar to Lisa, Barbie was concerned by Magnotta's obsession with serial killers, and in particular, Canadian serial killer Karla Homolka, half of the infamous Ken and Barbie murderers, who, along with her husband, Paul Bernardo, raped and murdered 3 women between 1990 and 1992. 2006 was also the year that Magnotta officially changed his name, with him now being known as Luka Rocco Magnotta. In his mind, Eric Clinton Kirk Newman was gone. He had erased the scared, lonely, insecure, abused child he was. However, it's clear that Eric was still very much alive, and the issues from his childhood were becoming more intense, and his pathological need for attention would only increase as the years progressed. In 2020, Magnotta described this period of his life to journalist Kristen Hugo at Medium.com, stating that he was, quote, a highly successful male escort, making $10,000 a night in New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, and dozens of other countries. He continued, I also was a paid model in Italy, Paris, Spain, Israel, Switzerland, London, and many other countries. I was also a ballet and theatre dancer in Russia and in the States. None of this was true. By 2007, Luka Magnotta declared bankruptcy due to being $17,000 in debt. He was failing in his mission. No one was paying attention to him. He was becoming more angry and more desperate. He then tried reality TV, auditioning for a variety of shows, including Cover Guy, telling one of the judges, quote, some people say I'm devastatingly good looking. He was rejected from each of them. In July 2007, Magnotta set up his own Wikipedia page. However, this was deleted in 2008 due to him not being considered noteworthy enough. In September 2007, one of the strangest, but in my opinion, most pivotal incidents occurred. Magnotta walked into the Toronto Sun newspaper headquarters to specifically deny online rumours that he was in a relationship with Karla Homolka. These rumours were entirely fictional, planted by Magnotta online to draw up attention. This clip shows the interview with Magnotta, which is really bizarre as he is denying these quote-unquote rumours.
My modeling career is kind of going downhill, basically, these days, to be honest with you. And
it's all because of this whole rumor of you dating Karla Homolka. This is the thing that's...
The rumors destroyed my life, basically, and I've been receiving death threats. My address is posted, that's why I had to move. I want my Pomeranian back. It was taken out of my SUV. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown here. My reputation is completely ruined. I just want everybody to I want to set the record straight that me and her have absolutely no connection. I go in to see casting directors. I go in to see agents. You know, they know who I am. You know, it's all over everywhere. Started being a stripper, and then basically I went from there to doing adult films, and I'm not ashamed of doing the adult films. I have a problem though with people saying those to relatives, and now nobody wants to talk to me. I don't have anybody basically. Whoever's doing this, you know, please stop. You know, you're doing a lot of harm.
The reason why I think this incident is so important is because it demonstrated to Magnotta that the way to get attention was from something tragic, something disturbing, something heinous. No one had given him the time of day so far, but mentioned the name of a serial killer, and there's a camera in his face, and people were giving him the attention he so desperately craved. I think it was around this point that Luka Magnotta realised the only way he was going to get what he wanted was through horror, both in his words and his deeds, and he would engage in a 4.5-year campaign of grotesque online postings and eventually acts of despicable violence, all so that the world was forced to pay attention to him. Luka Magnotta spent thousands of hours online, creating hundreds of different accounts on various social media platforms, including around 70 on Facebook alone. He would use numerous aliases, including Vladimir Romanov, Mattia Del Santo, Jimmy, Justin, and Angel. All of these profiles were intended to promote Luka Magnotta, force people to pay attention to him, and, as I said a moment ago, it's clear that causing controversy and sickening people was what was primarily driving him now. On August 25, 2008, Magnotta, using one of his various aliases, posted an article online entitled Luka Magnotta, Incest with His Sister, in which, aside from self-aggrandizing, he discusses the parentage of a fictitious 2-year-old child. The blog reads, quote, Magnotta has been in numerous high-profile relationships over the years, but no one seems to know where his 2-year-old child came from. His family members are baffled, and they all believe his sister is the true mother of Magnotta's only child. They apparently unfolded their relationship in the Toronto suburbs. They had wonderful picnic Sunday brunches together, drank German wine, and ate fresh fruit, while courting one another in a strange relationship. When Luka is around you, says a friend, it's as if he has the face of a doll, as if everything that makes him human has been airbrushed away. He goes on to say, Luka is emotionless, and he is unable to feel guilt, fear, shame, or any other human emotion. Well, that explains why he's appeared all over the place nude, and has no qualms about engaging in intercourse with his sister. We've all already heard of his affair with his father's new wife. Luka said on his MySpace, it was just a one-time thing, no big deal. Right, wink wink, Luka thinks that's normal. Luka's letters and emails to his sister were exuberant, lustful, sarcastic. He can put on a good show. It's as though he mimics other people's emotions because he has none of his own. He is a psychopath. The blog continues later. There are pics swirling around of Luka with his son at Niagara Falls, the CN Tower, and other outings around South Ontario. But is someone with as much psychological problems as him even fit to raise a baby? He is in fact now living in the Caribbean with his new wife, Karla Homolka, who was convicted of murdering 3 people in 1993. Both Homolka and Magnotta spend their time between Montreal and the Caribbean now, trying desperately to escape the media. Luka is fiercely intelligent, and it shows in his face. However, he enjoys playing the victim to escape troubles, and he is very, very good at it. One might call him a master manipulator. That post was truly deranged, and there's so much to unpack. So Magnotta has realised the power of his rumour about his apparent relationship with a serial killer, and continues to run with it. But then, he's gone on to the topic of incest, something else that he knew would cause disgust and revulsion. His posts are disgusting and bizarre, but that is the whole point. This is measured and goal-focused. The whole intention is to get people talking about Luka Magnotta, to pay attention to him. Also, look at how Magnotta describes himself: a master manipulator and a psychopath. It's important here to remember the words of American poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou, who said, quote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I spent a lot of time looking at archive posts of Magnotta, and the recurring theme is that his posts are scattergunned all over the internet, appearing on random message boards which have few, if any, responses. Again, I think that Luka Magnotta felt he was failing. Despite his obsessive postings, no one was paying attention to him. He needed something truly horrific to force the spotlight onto him, and beginning in 2010, this would involve the murder of animals, specifically cats. In 2010, Luka Magnotta continued posting false claims all over the internet in order to drum up attention for himself. In amongst these ramblings were admissions which give you an insight into his motivations. As an example, in one of these postings, Magnotta, writing under a false username, states, quote, "Luka is unable to live unless there is chaos in his life. It makes him feel as though he matters." In autumn 2010, Luka Magnotta's online postings became more dark and disturbing, with him beginning by posting a link on one of his Facebook pages to the video 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. This was a video filmed by a group of Ukrainian serial killers who murdered 21 people in just 2 months in 2007. This particular video shows the horrific murder of 48-year-old Sergei Yatsenko, who, over the course of an 8-minute video, is stabbed and then beaten to death with a hammer. I'll cover that case in the future. The video caused the response that Magnotta was looking for: disgust and revulsion. On the 21st of December 2010, a video called "One Guy, 2 Kittens" was posted on Facebook. In this video, a man, Magnotta, in a blue jacket, hood obscuring his face, places 2 kittens on a blanket. After petting these defenseless animals, he places them in a vacuum bag, attaches it to the vacuum and switches it on, sucking out all the air, suffocating the kittens. The video was soon removed, but the response was immediate. I was exactly what Magnotta wanted. Thousands of people were disgusted. I wanted to expose the vile cat killer and began signing up to various groups. A follow-up video, posted soon after the first, showed Magnotta rubbing the kittens' limp bodies against his genitals. One group posted a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the vacuum kitten killer. The Netflix series Don't Fuck With Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer, gives an in-depth understanding of the investigation by concerned citizens online trying to identify Magnotta. However, it was clear that he'd infiltrated the groups and was leaving clues. He sent a blurred out photo of his face, he sent members emails, and even posted his own name. Of course he did. None of this was worth it if he didn't get given the credit. In early 2011, information from an online investigator was passed to Toronto police, who began an investigation in February of that year, but this came to nothing, because these were only animals. Unfortunately, this is the same mentality in many countries, including the UK. Animal cruelty is hardly ever taken seriously by the police or the courts. This is horrific for several reasons. Firstly, animals are living, breathing creatures in their own right. They have their own thoughts, feelings and personalities. They also feel pain, they feel fear, and they can suffer PTSD as a result of being abused. They should be protected and looked after, and not abused, so harming them, in my opinion, should be seen as a serious offence with a punishment in line with that. However, secondly, there's a clear link between animal abuse and subsequent violent behaviour, including acts of serial homicide. If it was taken more seriously by the police and courts, and some intervention offered, then potentially people like Luka Magnotta could be stopped before they escalated. But this isn't the world we live in, and Luka Magnotta carried on. In late November 2011 and early December 2011, further videos of animal abuse were posted by him, including one where, whilst wearing a Santa hat, face obscured, fed a live kitten to a python. In another video, a kitten was duct taped to a broom handle and then drowned in a bathtub. The last of these videos was apparently made in Canada, but posted whilst Magnotta was visiting London, with him staying at the Fusilier Arms in Wembley, North London. A UK reporter for the Sun newspaper, called Alex West, was tipped off about Magnotta's location, and the fact that he was the one responsible for the videos, and he went to the pub he was staying at I confronted him as shown by this audio clip.
What did happen to those cats, though? I mean, it's... Come on.
Really?
What, did you give them away,
I'm
or...?
that stupid.
What, because you're worried about
No,
falling into
really.
a trap?
Really?
Well, I'm just...
You're trying to...
I'm just curious. No, I'm not. I just want to know. It just suddenly occurred to me. You got 2 cats here, little kittens.
That's
Very
not,
similar.
That's not me.
That isn't you.
No, it's not me. People are really good with Photoshop these days, aren't they?
You should have said that at the beginning, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
People are very good with Photoshop.
You've got a very similar jawline.
Very, very good with Photoshop, aren't they? Wouldn't you say? Just one big frame job that I have to deal with after another.
Why would somebody do that? Have they got a vendetta against you?
Many people do, but we won't get into that.
What for?
No.
What for? Is it because of your relationship with...
I have no relationship with her. I've said that numerous times.
Alright.
No, I've never even met her.
Okay.
I don't know her.
But this
This
is
is the
this
first
is a
you hear
pic,
about
this
that
is a
from the
picture
website.
of you in the Caribbean, is it?
Yes, of course it is.
Why would somebody make that up? What
It's
a
a
weird.
horrible accusation.
But
and I
why
don't
would
have
why
nothing to
would
do
somebody
with
do that and then plaster it all over the internet? It seems
That was
to
the
me
old news.
that you are obsessed with your own fame and getting a personality cult on the internet.
Really, is that the case? Well, if that was the case, wouldn't I be sitting down with every media outlet that's contacted me?
No, because you've got this.
But
sort
think
of-
about this for a
you've
minute.
got this-
No, let's
this
just go back to what
strange-
you said. If that was the case, and you keep saying that I'm obsessed with it, then wouldn't I be out giving interviews, and wouldn't I be admitting to the horrible things that you've accused me
No,
of?
because you know you'll
it's
get
part of
into
the
trouble.
arts.
How can
Yeah.
I get into trouble if I haven't done anything wrong?
So, but
Only people that do things wrong can get in
As
trouble.
Simon says, this is all part of your game, is that you're putting out all this information about yourself, but denying it's you doing it.
And
and
why
it's-
exactly would I do that?
Because it's this manipulation that
How
you
do
go
you
on
come
about
to
on
these
your website.
conclusions? How do you come to these conclusions? You keep going back to the
But-
website,
but
but
what's
it's not
so- what's so
anything
strange is
making
your-
sense.
your
Because on
reaction-
the website it says that the media is the one that manipulates people.
Your reaction,
and that's what I said.
Your reaction is not a normal reaction from somebody being asked about these questions.
Oh, you're a doctor now?
No, they just aren't, because
What's
you would
the
be.
normal reaction?
Well,
I
it would,
said that I
it would
have
be,
nothing to do with this.
but you seem very au fait with everything I'm talking about. I mean, it doesn't come to you as a surprise that I should ask you these things. You just rehearsed a flat denial of them. There's no sort of surprise that I could even imagine such a thing. You seem to be very aware that this is what people might be saying, because it's something that you have concocted yourself.
Is that the truth?
Well, you tell me.
I just told you I have nothing to do with this.
Well,
Absolutely nothing. And these horrible things that you're accusing me of are offensive, actually. I find them offensive.
yeah, well, I mean,
Anybody who is in my position would.
your dog.
That's true.
That wasn't another animal that you killed, was it?
Yeah, but I didn't kill any animals. I've never killed any animals in my entire life. I love animals.
What
I'm an
happened
animal
to-
lover.
What happened to these 2 kittens here? Are
You keep trying to trick me into giving statements,
I'm not.
but it's not going to work.
Are these the 2
And I've
kittens?
been so nice to you by
Are
trying
these-
to talk to you.
Are these the 2 kittens that were posted on the internet being suffocated in a
I
plastic
have nothing
bag?
to say. I'm not involved in any crime whatsoever.
Despite his claims of innocence, Alex stated that, quote, behind the denials, it seems he was getting some sort of bizarre pleasure out of the attention. Magnotta immediately fled the country, fleeing to the Netherlands, but 2 days after this interaction, he sent an email to the offices of the Sun newspaper, in which he revelled in the attention he was getting. He also threatened an escalation in his offending. He wrote, quote, I will send you a copy of the new video I'm going to be making. You see, killing is different than smoking. With smoking, you can actually quit. Once you kill and taste blood, it's impossible to stop. The urge is too strong not to continue. You know, the fun part of all of this is watching millions of people get angry and frustrated because they can't catch me. That's why I love this. I love the risk factor. It's also fun watching people gathering all the evidence, then not being able to name or catch me. You see, I always win. I always hold the trump card, and I'll continue to make more movies. London is wonderful because all the people are so stupid. It's easy, so I have to disappear for a while until people quit bothering me. But next time you hear from me, It will be in a movie I'm producing that will have some humans in it, not just pussies. The email was signed off with the name John Kilbride. John Kilbride was a 12-year-old murder victim of the Moors murderers Ian Brady and Mara Hindley, who killed at least 5 children in the UK in the 1960s. This was absolutely deliberate. Magnotta could not help but drop in tidbits of information showing his obsession with serial killers and his desire to emulate them. Another reference was found in the video where a kitten was fed to the python. In the background to this video, the song Little Drummer Boy is heard playing. This same tune was heard on audio tapes made by Brady and Hindley whilst they recorded one of their other victims, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey, screaming in terror and begging for her life while she was raped and murdered. Magnotta continued to post his deranged and disturbed posts, including on March 16, 2012, 2 months before the murder, which was entitled Necrophilic Serial Killer Luka Magnotta, which is actually about him espousing the virtues of necrophilia and claiming he was sexually attracted to the dead. Part of this screed says, quote, "When I was a young child, I used to spend much of my time alone, either in the woods or in the local cemetery, where there was the grave of a 19-year-old boy who died in the early half of last century. I felt close to that boy and would put flowers in the woods and take them to his grave. In 2003, I discovered a mummified corpse of a young man in a vault in a church where I was doing restoration work for a friend. I fell in love with him, and it broke my heart to seal him in there. I wanted to take him home and look after him. I daydream about having him here with me. Silly, ordinary things, like watching TV together, listening to music, taking him out for picnics, watching a DVD late at night, before taking him up to bed with me. All very ordinary things, apart from the fact that I want to do them with a desiccated or mummified corpse. I don't have a problem attracting living men, I'm just naturally attracted to the dead. Some people never realise until it's too late that expecting their feelings and not acting anymore is true freedom. It's not cool to the world being a necrophiliac, it's bloody lonely, but I don't really care. I've never cared what people thought of me. Most people are judgmental idiots." Magnotta also posted a video on YouTube entitled Cannibal Serial Killer Luka Magnotta, although this was quickly taken down. I need to break here for a moment. I'll bring everything together at the end of the video, but given the complexity of the profile of Luka Magnotta, I want to explain what I think brought him to this point, just a few weeks before the murder. Specifically, I think there were 2 distinct threads to Magnotta running parallel to each other, both with the same objective, getting attention. One thread wanted to get this from becoming famous, becoming an actor in some form or another, so Magnotta played the game. He starred in porn films, went to auditions for reality TV shows, got professional headshots, changed his name to make it more memorable, and got plastic surgery to look the part of a film star. However, the second thread was underpinned by a fascination with the infamous, those whose names are remembered due to the horror and tragedy they caused, specifically serial killers. Likely because they were Canadian, this began with Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo, but then extended to others including the Moors murderers. I believe that he was drawn to these people because of their love of violence, which matched his own homicidal fancies, but also the amount of attention they received because of their crimes. These people had books written about them, films made about them. Their names or pseudonyms were known by people around the world, even decades after the crimes or their deaths. I think Magnotta was able to temper this second thread initially and try to pursue fame legitimately, for want of a better term. This was likely because there were so many upsides to this: money, a comfortable lifestyle, freedom. The second avenue would be confinement, likely for the rest of his life. However, his attempts to break into the mainstream failed. No one cared. This likely made Magnotta extremely angry and ran contrary to his narcissistic mindset. How dare people not give me what I deserve? Can they not see how good looking I am? This likely increased his homicidal urges, but also galvanised his thinking that the only way to get what he wanted, attention, was to go down a darker path. As I said earlier, him aligning himself with Karla Homolka showed the power of infamy. When he mentioned her name, people paid attention. Then, when he murdered innocent defenceless kittens, thousands of people were now saying his name and searching for him. If he killed a human being, then maybe hundreds of thousands of people would know his name. He would get his own Wikipedia page. Books would be written about him. His name and deeds would live on. He would matter, the only thing he ever wanted. Imagine he fantasized about his name splashed across the newspapers, with a newsreader talking about a devastatingly good-looking killer. If people had to die for him to get the attention he wanted, so be it. Their lives were insignificant compared to the world needing to know the name Luka Magnotta and how amazing he was. And so, Luka Magnotta put his plans into action, and an innocent man called Jun Lin would lose his life. In court, it was argued by Luka Magnotta's defence that he was not criminally responsible for the offences he committed due to him being mentally unwell. However, in my opinion, nothing could be further from the truth. It was a crime meticulously planned, promoted, and eventually carried out by him, and he left a trail of evidence in the weeks leading up to May the 24th, 2012, the day he murdered Jun Lin. This planning occurred in apartment 208, 5720, Takari Boulevard in Montreal, where Luka Magnotta had moved into in January 2012. Over the course of 2 days, May the 15th to the 16th, 2012, various comments were made online via aliases controlled by Magnotta, promoting a new video called One Lunatic, One Ice Pick. This was the name that would be used to title the video, showing the dismemberment of Jun Lin, although his murder would not occur for another week. A post made around this time showed a picture of a man, face obscured, holding what appeared to be an ice pick to the camera. As I said earlier, Magnotta's favourite film scene, the initial murder from Basic Instinct, was his inspiration. The murder weapon in that scene was also an ice pick. However, the item held by Magnotta in the picture he posted wasn't an actual ice pick, it was a screwdriver he'd spray painted silver. But the fact remains that Luka Magnotta had decided he was going to murder someone, film it, and upload it online, and he was working to create buzz for his next cinematic release. In the months prior to the murder, Magnotta had also been on online forums doing research on sedatives, including dosages that would render someone unconscious, but not necessarily kill them. Between May the 3rd and May the 24th, 2012, Magnotta posted ads to Craigslist, which had been reported alternatively as adverts for sexual meetups, but also more generic requests for men to come to his apartment. Some people claim this was the actual post used to lure Jun Lin to his death, which references Magnotta looking for men to make a movie for which they would not be paid, and specifically, it says no sex will be involved. I find this somewhat hard to believe. This was clearly Magnotta looking for a victim, and it seems strange that he would expect many replies to an advert that said something about meeting a complete stranger for no monetary gain, simply to make a movie. People are willing to throw caution to the wind where sex is involved, so logically, in order to get the most responses and get people to meet a complete stranger, this would likely have been offered. However, regardless, men did respond, not just Jun Lin, but also another man who Magnotta met on May the 18th, 2012, 6 days before the murder of Jun. The identity of this man has never been established. His existence was only determined later through CCTV analysis and footage found on Magnotta's camera. Footage shows Magnotta and this man arriving at the apartment complex on the evening of the 18th of May. What happened next is unclear, but the following photos were recovered, showing Magnotta lying cradling this man, who appears to be asleep. In another photo, he sat next to the same man, who again appears to be asleep. Footage was also discovered, which shows this man tied to the bed, and the sounds of snoring could be heard. Magnotta films himself straddling this man, saying, quote, "Are you okay?" The next morning, the 19th of May 2012, Magnotta and the man are seen leaving the building, with Magnotta supporting him as he seems unsteady on his feet. I don't believe this was an attempted murder, or that Magnotta lost his nerve. This was the final trial run. This man was a stand-in for the real victim. Magnotta likely drugged him and tied him up to check dosages and the restraints for the main performance, which was only days away. With this rehearsal over, Magnotta went back online to find a man, this time to kill, and he came across 33-year-old Jun Lin. Again, I need to reiterate the warning I gave at the beginning of the video, as I'll be discussing graphic violence in this section, so please skip forward if this will upset you. So Jun Lin was born on the 30th of December 1978 in the city of Wuhan in China. He was the son of Diren Li and his wife Zhu Wei. He also had a sister called Mimi. He was described as a smart and studious young man, the pride of his family, who had always had ambitions to travel the world and immerse himself in new cultures and new experiences. For years, Jun had been interested in Canada, including the people and the scenery, and in December 2010, he moved his whole life a world away from Montreal. He intended to start a business and was studying computer engineering at Concordia University, and was also working as a convenience store. Jun was described by the university as a quote exceptional student, and his friends spoke of him fondly as a man who was happy, genuine, caring and funny. It's clear that Jun made his mark after being in Canada for less than 2 years. His death at the age of 33 robbed the world of a compassionate man who would have likely contributed much to the world, in contrast to his killer, who had no interest but to take and destroy for his own ends. Jun was gay, something he hid from his family, and they were pressuring him to find a nice girl to settle down with. He'd previously been married to a woman, but they had divorced. It seemed like part of the draw of Canada was their more liberal lifestyle, and when he came to the country, he lived as an openly gay man. He had a boyfriend in Canada, but the pair split up weeks before his murder. Likely to deal with the grief of losing this connection, Jun began meeting men online, and one of these encounters was with Luka Magnotta. As I said earlier, it's not clear whether Jun met Magnotta after responding to an advert for sex or simply to make a movie, but regardless, they did meet on the evening of Thursday the 24th of May 2012. They then travelled back to 5720 Dakari Boulevard and were caught on CCTV camera entering the apartment complex at 10:16 p.m. and making their way up to apartment 208. Jun is the one in the baseball cap. He wouldn't leave this building alive. What happened next will never be known for sure, but given the presence of sedatives found in Jun's system, it's likely that he was drugged by Magnotta, probably by being offered a laced drink. He was then stripped and tied to the bed. Magnotta then set up his video camera and began recording his movie. The video begins by showing Jun tied to the bed naked, a piece of cloth covering his eyes, another over his mouth. He occasionally moves his arms and legs. He's alive, but likely sedated. A man dressed all in black, Magnotta, is next to the bed, his face obscured by a hood. The song True Faith by New Order is playing in the background. This appears to be a nod to another film that Magnotta had become obsessed with, American Psycho, with this track playing during the opening nightclub scene. Magnotta then stabs Jun with a screwdriver repeatedly in the abdomen, showing the wounds to the camera. The video then jumps to showing Jun again, this time dead. A horrific knife wound to his neck is seen, which Magnotta had inflicted, and which was determined to have likely been the cause of his death. He then uses a knife to slice at the body. The video then jumps to showing Jun's body, now decapitated, and Magnotta then starts cutting off his limbs. He uses a dismembered arm to rub his crotch. Magnotta then places Jun's limbless and headless torso stomach down on the bed, lies on top of it, and appears to simulate having sex with it. He then uses a knife and fork to cut away pieces of flesh from Jun's buttocks and tries to get his dog to eat them. He also inserts a bottle into Jun's anus before using a dismembered arm to masturbate himself. In a longer version seen by the police, there's apparently clear evidence of cannibalism. Luka Magnotta was then seen emerging from the apartment at around 2 a.m. By this point, Jun was inevitably dead, his horrifically brutalised body lying in the apartment. Magnotta was busy over the course of May the 25th and May the 26th, 2012. He was seen repeatedly going to and from the apartment bins in the complex, dumping evidence, including the murder weapon, electronic devices including a laptop and digital camera, which contained a memory card, pieces of paper, bloody clothing, knives, gloves, and the spray-painted screwdriver. However, this was not before Magnotta had sat down and edited the video he'd shot before uploading it under the title he promised, One Lunatic, One Ice Pick. He also worked on his escape plan. On the 25th of May, he booked a round trip between Montreal and Paris using a passport in his own name. He was due to fly out the next day in the afternoon. He then left the complex and dumped Jun's head approximately 5 miles away in a local park. He also bought a suitcase. Jun's torso was placed inside and simply dumped amongst the bins outside the apartment complex. Magnotta lined the case with spray paint likely to cover up the smell of decomposition, hoping this would mean it would simply be picked up and taken to landfill, no questions asked. At around 12 p.m. on May the 26th, 2012, Luka Magnotta travelled to a local post office and mailed 4 packages. These contained the severed hands and feet of Jun Lin. Jun's left foot was sent to the Conservative Party headquarters in Ottawa, arriving there on the 29th of May. It was opened by staff who noticed the foul smell. Inside was a note which said, quote, "Stephen Harper and Lauren Teskey will know who this is. They fucked up big time." This note referred to the Prime Minister of Canada at the time, Stephen Harper, and his wife. Another package, containing Jun's left hand, was intercepted in a Canadian postal processing factory addressed to the Liberal Party headquarters in Ottawa. This too came with a note, which said, quote, "You need to speak to Lauren Teskey and her family, lots to hide." Again, the reference was to the Prime Minister's wife. On the 5th of June 2012, Jun's right foot was received in a package by St George's School, a private boys' school in the Dunbar area of Vancouver. This too came with a note, which said, quote, "Roses are red, violets are blue. The police will need dental records to identify you, bitch." On the same day, Jun's left foot was received by staff at False Creek Elementary School in Vancouver. It appears clear that Magnotta sent these packages to political organisations to cause as much press attention as possible. However, it's never really been established why he also sent dismembered body parts to schools, and in particular these 2. By the time that these packages were received, Luka Magnotta was on the run, having boarded his flight from Montreal to Paris on the afternoon of May the 26th, 2012. On the 29th of May 2012, the landlord at the apartment complex on Dakari Boulevard was checking rubbish that had been left by the bin men, which included a suitcase. He opened it and was confronted with a human torso. He quickly called the police, and when they arrived, they cordoned off the area, began searching through the rubbish. They recovered the incriminating evidence that Luka Magnotta had tried to discard, and they also found his ID. Police initially thought that Magnotta was the body they had found. They were let into his apartment and were confronted with a terrible scene, including a mattress that had been soaked with blood, and there were bloodstains all over the apartment. Quickly, it was established through CCTV footage and other checks that Luka Magnotta was not the victim, but likely the murderer, and that he'd now fled the country. The 29th of May was also the date that concerned friends reported Jun Lin missing to the police, and also the day that one of the packages containing his body parts was delivered, and another intercepted. It quickly became apparent that these body parts and the torso found at the apartment block were linked, although the man's identity was not known at this point. Handwriting on notes in each of the packages were found to match that of Luka Magnotta when compared to scribblings of his found on pieces of paper taken from the rubbish. The authorities acted quickly, and on the 31st of May 2012, they charged Luka Magnotta in his absence with the following offences: first-degree murder, interfering with a corpse, mailing obscene material, corrupting morals via internet, and threatening the Prime Minister Stephen Harper. They approached Interpol, who the same day issued a red notice for him. Essentially, this was the direction for police forces around the world to arrest and detain Magnotta, pending extradition back to Canada. In early June, the 2 other packages containing Jun's body parts were recovered, and again these were linked to the torso found in Magnotta's apartment complex. It was established around this time that the body was likely that of Jun Lin, and his family provided a DNA sample, which, on the 13th of June 2012, definitely concluded that all the body parts came from the same murder victim, and that this was indeed Jun Lin. His head was not found until July the 1st, after the police received an anonymous tip. It's unclear whether this was Magnotta himself calling, but it's been concluded that it was most likely a member of the public who found the head and called the police, but didn't want the aggravation of being involved in any sort of investigation. A pathologist was able to determine that Jun had been sedated, and that he'd been killed by having his throat cut, with the majority of the injuries to his body being made post-mortem. So the police knew who'd been murdered, they knew where, how, and likely by who, but at this point, they didn't know where Luka Magnotta had gone. Luka Magnotta's decision to flee to Paris was not an arbitrary one. In April 2012, the month beforehand, he'd made contact with a man via a gay chat site, and they became friendly. He'd also made friends whilst visiting there in 2010. He landed on May the 27th, and his cell phone signal was traced to a hotel in Banyule. The police arrived in force the next day, but Magnotta had checked out. Pornographic magazines and an air sickness bag were found in the hotel room. By this point, Magnotta had reached out to the man he'd been speaking to online and had been invited over to his apartment, where he slept on the man's sofa. During this time, he couldn't help but brag about what he'd done. He sent his sister a message, saying, quote, "How does it feel to be the sister of a murderer?" The French authorities were actively looking for Magnotta, at the same time that he was looking for another person to leech off, and preferably someone in a different country. Using another gay chat website, Magnotta interacted with a man in Berlin. He claimed he'd been in a long-term relationship in Paris, but this had broken down, and he wanted to relocate for a fresh start. The pair agreed to meet, and on the 30th of May 2012, Magnotta was caught on CCTV boarding a train from Paris to Berlin. When he arrived, he met with the man he'd been speaking to, who reportedly was not attracted to Magnotta, mainly because of his dishevelled appearance. Magnotta stayed at the man's apartment, although they slept in separate beds. They went out several times to restaurants, gay clubs and parties. He was also introduced to his host group of friends and spent several thousands of euros very quickly, likely using stolen credit cards. On Monday the 4th of June 2012, his host was getting tired of Magnotta and wanted him gone. He showed him how to use the public transport system in Berlin, provided him with a mobile phone and contact information for a friend of his to call if he got lost. He also showed Magnotta where he could find an internet cafe. On this, his final day of freedom, he posted a video online showing himself in Berlin, saying hello to his quote, fans. Just before midday, Luka Magnotta entered an internet cafe in the Berlin district of Neukölln. He then began searching online, reading articles about himself. The cafe owner recognised Magnotta from an Interpol bulletin which had been in the newspaper and called the police. The Berlin police were not taking any chances, sending 7 officers to apprehend the wanted fugitive. Magnotta gave a false name, but quickly dropped this facade and simply told the police, quote, "You got me," before the handcuffs were slapped on him and he was led away. He didn't fight extradition and was flown by a military plane from Germany to Quebec's Mirabel Airport on June the 18th, 2012, landing at 6:52 p.m. He'd been shackled the entire flight and was under heavy guard. From the airport, he was placed straight into a van and driven to a Montreal Police Operational Centre in the north of the city, where he was held pending the start of his court case the next day. On the 19th of June 2012, Luka Magnotta appeared in court via video link to plead not guilty to all charges. On the 21st of June, he appeared in person to request a trial by jury. The trial eventually began on the 29th of September 2014 at the Superior Court of Quebec. Luka Magnotta admitted that he killed and dismembered Jun Lin, mailed his body parts around the country, but that he was not guilty due to diminished responsibility. This was due to him claiming to have a mental disorder at the time of the crime, which meant that he was not fully in control of his actions. In the case of Magnotta, his defence argued that he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a complex chronic mental health condition characterised by continuous or elapsing periods of psychosis, i.e. a disconnect from reality. Common symptoms include hallucinations, both visual and auditory, delusions, and disorganised thinking. Paranoid schizophrenia is a subsection of this condition, characterised by a person feeling distrustful and suspicious of other people, and this is often exhibited by their hallucinations and delusions, which can include belief they're being harassed or persecuted. They may believe they're being chased, followed, watched, plotted against or poisoned, often by family members, friends, or sometimes government agencies. It was this latter subset of the disorder which Magnotta's defence were arguing was relevant to this case, with him being in a state of psychosis when he killed and dismembered Jun Lin, which he did because he was acting on his paranoid beliefs. In order to bolster their case, the defence commissioned 3 psychiatrists to write reports to the court evaluating Magnotta. I've accessed one of these, written by forensic psychiatrist Dr. Joel Watts. Within this document, Magnotta lays out his version of events. Much of Magnotta's statements revolve around a man he said was a client of his for several years before the murder, whose name I've already mentioned, Emmanuel Manny Lopez. Manny was apparently obsessed with Magnotta and abused him both physically and sexually. He was a monster, a sadist, and a psychopath. The argument was that Manny was indeed a real person. Post-trial, Magnotta would claim that the cat videos he made did feature him, but that it was Manny, the real Manny, who directed his actions and threatened him if he didn't murder the kittens. However, due to the abuse that Magnotta claimed he'd suffered from Manny, the defence were claiming that his voice became part of his paranoid delusions and hallucinations. Magnotta claimed that in May 2012, Manny contacted him and was threatening him, and he was the one who forced him to put the advert online, looking for men. When he met with Jun Lin, he heard the voice of Manny in his head, telling him to tie Jun up and record this, otherwise he was afraid that Manny would come to the building to harm him. Magnotta claimed that he'd heard the voice of Manny stating he was outside, in a van, with tinted windows, and he also claimed that Jun was a government agent who would kill him. The report then says, quote, Mr. Magnotta was hearing voices in his head saying, "Kill him, he's an agent." Mr. Magnotta himself added, "My mind started racing very fast. I don't remember what was happening. It was like a blackout. I remember feeling wet, hearing voices, saying, 'Cut it.'" Magnotta then claimed he could remember little of his subsequent actions, including murdering and dismembering Jun Lin. Why was the video uploaded to the internet? Manny told him to do this. This was the same explanation he gave for his post-offence behaviour, including sending pieces of Jun around the country. This was not what he wanted. Manny was the driving force. All three defence psychiatrist reports essentially reached the same conclusion. Luka Magnotta suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, and his condition was so acute at the time of his crimes that he was psychotic, i.e. disconnected from reality, and therefore he was not fully responsible for his actions. To reinforce this case, the defence presented Magnotta's extensive documented mental health history. From this, it was clear that he'd had contact with mental health services for much of his adult life. During these contacts, he would often present with paranoid delusions related to persecution. It appears that he had in fact been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in the past. However, it was also noted that concerns had been raised by mental health professionals over the years. They could not discount the possibility that Magnotta was faking symptoms on many occasions as a way to get access to drugs, but also to get attention. Given that Magnotta's father suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, he would have had good awareness of the symptoms of this condition to present to doctors. One of his former partners stated that, despite his denials, Magnotta was a heavy drug user, so potentially this was his way of getting his fix. However, if Magnotta was using drugs to excess, then potentially he was experiencing drug-induced psychosis, which is when a person experiences delusions or hallucinations, but as a direct result of substance abuse as opposed to an underlying condition. So potentially some of the occasions where he sought help due to his paranoia were real incidents, but caused by excessive drug use and not paranoid schizophrenia. The Crown pushed back. Neither of the psychiatrists they commissioned concluded in their reports that Luka Magnotta was schizophrenic. An independent psychiatrist also didn't conclude that Magnotta had this condition. The conclusion of their reports I'll come back to in the final section of the video. The Crown pointed out there was no evidence that Manny had ever existed. If he didn't exist, they didn't correlate that he became part of Magnotta's delusions and hallucinations. The Crown pointed out it was curious how utterly relaxed Magnotta appeared in the CCTV footage of him post-offence, when he was apparently fearful that a dangerous man was outside his property in an unmarked car, but yet he was spotted pottering about with no sign of anxiety or fear. But the cornerstone of the Crown's case was the premeditated nature of Magnotta's actions and his clear goal-orientated behaviour. He had advertised his crimes days before, obtained weapons to carry it out, conducted a rehearsal a few days before the main offence, edited the video of his crime and uploaded it to the internet, cleaned up the crime scene, sent packages with clear purpose to bring more attention to himself, before planning his escape and fleeing the country. None of this, they argued, was indicative of disorganised thinking associated with schizophrenia. In contrast, I want to briefly mention the case of Richard Chase, a man who murdered 6 people in Sacramento, California in the space of just a month. He was a paranoid schizophrenic who believed he needed to drink the blood of his victims in order to stave off ill health and his impending death. His victims were chosen at random. He made no attempt to hide his crimes. He left his victims where he killed them, before wandering off into the night, and the scenes he left behind were a forensic treasure trove full of finger and shoe prints. There's clearly no resemblance between these two cases. So the jury had to decide whether Luka Magnotta was a mentally ill man who was not fully in control of his actions, or a cold, calculating individual fully in control of his faculties, who had planned and carried out an act of absolute evil. On the 23rd of December 2014, the jury delivered their verdict. They found Luka Magnotta guilty of the premeditated murder of Jun Lin, dismembering his corpse, uploading a video of the desecration online, as well as posting parts of his body around the country. He showed no emotion when the jury read out their verdict. He then stood before Quebec Superior Court Justice Guy Cournoyer for sentence. For the murder of Jun Lin, Luka Magnotta was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum time of 25 years before he can apply for parole. Jun Lin was laid to rest at Montreal's Notre-Dame-de-Neige Cemetery on the 26th of July 2012. I found this picture during my research, and I think it perfectly encapsulates the horror in this case. It shows Jun Lin's father, Jun Lin, inconsolable, whilst hugging the box containing his son's ashes. Jun attended court every day and heard in graphic detail how his son died, but he wanted to be there to see justice being done. His mother could not bear to hear what had happened to her beloved child. I want to read the eulogy released by the family for a memorial service a month after Jun's murder, as I think it's beautiful. Quote, "Our beloved son, Jun Lin, has left us for 1 whole month. The last 30 days have been the most difficult time in our life. We live in the agony of grief, of losing a loved one and missing him desperately every day. Jun was a very kind person and filial son. He was well respected, sincere, open-minded and mild-tempered. He enjoyed helping others. I remember when he was a child, once I took him to the grocery market. He saw an old man kneeling down on the street, begging with a broken bowl. He asked me for $1 and gave it to that man to buy food. Another time, he was waiting for the bus at a bus stop. A woman holding a baby in one arm and a piece of luggage in another tried to get on the bus. Jun didn't hesitate to help her, to carry the luggage onto the bus. He did a lot of good deeds. To us, Jun was also a loving and considerate son. Every time it was windy or rainy, he would call me, "Mum, it's started to rain, don't go out." Even after he came to Canada, he still kept calling back home frequently, reminding me to be careful about my health. He sent me a lot of nutritional supplements from Canada. In August of last year, I had fractured my hand. He was so concerned that he called his sister over and over again, telling her to take good care of me. He was such a nice and caring person. However, his life was ended unexpectedly by a monster. How can we accept that cruel fact? How can we face the days going forward without our beloved son? Our family used to gather together during the spring festival every year. During this short period of a dozen days, we were accompanied by our children and enjoyed the happiness of family love. We love and are loved by our children, and we lived a happy and satisfied life. All of a sudden, everything ended on that day, May the 25th. We lost our son forever. He is now in another world beyond our reach. During the month after Jun's death, we've been living in deep sorrow every day. You can't imagine how sad we are. Our hearts are broken and bleeding. Every day we live like walking dead, without a soul. We hope to bring the monster who murdered our son to justice, and we hope he will get the punishment he deserves. We dare not imagine how much suffering Jun underwent, how much horror he felt on the day he was murdered 1 month ago. He was such a kind and caring person. Anytime we saw his photo, tears sprouted from our eyes. We wept and wept until our tears were exhausted. Our voices were choked, and we could not get a word out. Our lovely son, poor child, where are you now? Where are you? Your mum and dad miss you. We miss you very much, so much. It's been 1 month since you left this world. Today your friends, classmates, people from the city of Montreal, Concordia University, the Chinese Consulate, the Chinese Students Association, and Chinese communities, as well as many other kind people, have come here to hold a memorial service for you, mourning your tragic death, showing their sympathy for your misfortune, and condemning the criminal. We believe our son can see what happens here. He can feel your kindness and love. With your love and attention, he will feel happy in heaven. It's been over 10 years since the death of Jun Lin, and I pray for peace for his family, that they have been able to rebuild their lives to some extent, and continue to bravely walk through life without their beloved son and brother, and that they are reunited with him one day, never to be separated again. I've already mentioned some of my thoughts regarding the profile of Luka Magnotta, but I want to expand upon this and bring everything together. In order to do this, we need to look at the opinions of the 3 psychiatrists who assessed Magnotta and produced reports for his trial, who were either commissioned by the Crown or were independent of both parties. None assessed him as having paranoid schizophrenia, and instead, across the reports, they proposed that Magnotta had a range of personality disorders. Personality disorders are mental health conditions characterised by long-term patterns of problematic thinking and behaviour. These conditions are almost always linked to traumatic upbringings, which impact a child's ability to form healthy ways to perceive and manage in the world. Schizophrenia is a psychiatric condition, i.e. it can be managed with medication. Personality disorders are not. There is no medication which can cure these types of conditions. Therapy is used to help people manage the traits. There are a variety of personality disorders, each with their own symptoms, but there are often crossovers between conditions. In the case of Luka Magnotta, front and centre was him being assessed as likely having histrionic personality disorder, which is characterised by persistent attention-seeking behaviour and extreme discomfort in any situation where they are not the centre of attention. In addition, he's believed to have borderline personality disorder, also known as emotionally unstable personality disorder, whereby he struggles to manage his emotions, especially when confronted by difficult situations such as rejection. Then there's antisocial personality disorder, which is characterised by, amongst other things, repeated law breaking, persistent deceptiveness, reckless disregard for the safety of others, superficial charm, as well as limited or complete lack of remorse or guilt for their behaviour. These last traits should be familiar to those who have listened to my videos a lot, as they are the same as psychopathy. As someone rightly pointed out a while ago, and which I should explain, psychopathy is not actually a clinical diagnosis in itself. It's a label given to those who display extreme traits of antisocial personality disorder. So for example, someone with this general personality disorder may persistently rule break, but their crimes are not very serious and they may feel some level of guilt for their actions. Whereas someone labelled a psychopath may commit extremely serious crimes repeatedly, such as rape and murder, and have absolutely no guilt for their actions. I cannot find where Magnotta was assessed to fit on this continuum, but I imagine it was at the extreme end, meaning he would be labelled a psychopath. Lastly, there is narcissistic personality disorder, characterised by self-absorption, an inflated sense of self-worth, and a belief they should receive preferential treatment due to being special. However, as I've said in my other videos, narcissism is always underpinned by extremely low self-esteem and self-hatred, which has evolved over time to an individual creating a false narrative in their head to protect themselves. So, rather than being worthless, they're in fact special, better than other people. They've convinced themselves of the exact opposite of how they actually feel deep down in order to cope in life. The sheer number of personality disorders that Luka Magnotta was believed to have, I think, could be seen as an indicator of just how horrific his childhood was and how damaged he was as a child. His behaviour as an adult was inexcusable, but he barely stood a chance considering his upbringing. It was here that he was clearly subject to chronic neglect, meaning that he spent his whole life desperate for some sort of attention. There was clearly no nurturing, any sort of positive praise or reinforcement, resulting in Magnotta having absolutely no sense of self-worth or any self-esteem. In fact, he was essentially isolated for 11 years of his life, with him primarily being exposed to a woman who was controlling and had her own mental health difficulties. It was also within this environment where he was exposed to violence, and there was absolutely no input in teaching him about empathy or guilt. It's clear he hated the person he was and tried desperately to be anyone else. Linking this to the attention-seeking behaviour, it's apparently he only felt valued when other people were looking at him, speaking his name. As time progressed, he became narcissistic, having created a false narrative that he was successful, superior to others, and special, in order to move as far away from the scared and unloved boy he was, and he needed attention to maintain this protective shell. His way of coping with the situation was to torture animals and idolise movie stars, and eventually serial killers, becoming obsessed with the idea that fame was the cure to all of his insecurities, the way to fill the deep dark hole inside of him. So, as I said earlier, I think that Magnotta began to try to pursue fame through more conventional means, with aspirations of being a model and or an actor. He was hoping someone would headhunt him, see how amazing he was, and the world would open up to him. As he got nowhere, despite going to auditions, getting modelling headshots, and creating buzz online, he became more angry that people were not acknowledging how amazing he truly was. He linked himself to Karla Homolka, appearing to be the sole time that anyone actually paid him much attention. This was only because he linked himself to something horrific. So he began posting disgusting, deranged posts about incest and necrophilia online. With regards to this point, it's important to point out that I don't think there's much evidence that Luka Magnotta was a sexual deviant. In fact, the opposite seems true. It seems that a consistent theme of the reports from his partners was that Magnotta was reluctant to have sex. In fact, his time escorting, whilst it did involve sexual encounters, appeared to involve older men paying him for companionship, being a travel companion, etc. This seems to be how he flitted around the world. Lastly, whilst a terrible point to mention, it appears that when he was simulating sex on the torso of Jun Lin, he didn't have an erection. In this respect, it seems likely that all of his talk of necrophilia, incest, etc. were just ways to be as controversial as possible. It feels like Magnotta was just running down a list of what he knew people would be most disgusted by. However, he didn't just want to link himself to other people's crimes. If he was the one committing them, then the attention would be all his. So he began filming himself killing animals, and the internet exploded. Thousands of people were spending hours of their lives tracking him down. He was now relevant. He was now important. What would happen if he filmed himself killing someone and released it on the internet? The response would be massive. He would be relevant forever. So he started searching for a victim. Jun Lin was the unfortunate man who responded to his online advert. Jun Lin was not a person to Luka Magnotta. He was a thing, a movie prop, something to make him famous. He didn't care what butchering him and releasing a video of this into the world would do to his family. I've no doubt that killing Jun gave Magnotta a thrill and a feeling of power, as well as a way for him to replicate his favourite movie scene, but essentially his death was just a necessary first step to his ultimate objective of getting attention. What he did to Jun's body was him running through the list of the most depraved things that one person could do to another, but not because, as I alluded to a moment ago, this got him sexually excited, or he was meeting some other particular need in that moment by doing these things, but in order to make as shocking a video as possible to ensure that it, and by virtue of this he, would always be remembered. He then fled. I've read that Magnotta likely did not believe he would get caught. I don't think this is true at all. The police pieced everything together quickly and began looking for him, but, had they not, I imagine that Luka Magnotta would have probably called the police and dropped his own name into the investigation, resulting in him eventually being arrested anyway. He was spending thousands of euros quickly, a last hurrah before the inevitable. The whole point was attention. He wouldn't get as much of this if he wasn't actually caught. This mindset also means that I don't believe that Luka Magnotta had real aspirations of being a serial killer. This was again a term he knew, if he splashed online, would shock people. Instead, I think he knew he likely had one chance, one victim, to get the attention he wanted, and this is what he did. As for Luka Magnotta, taking into account time on remand before his sentence, he will likely be eligible for parole in around 2037, so in around 13 years. He has, unsurprisingly, never shown an ounce of remorse, and over the years has fluctuated in how much responsibility he takes. He has claimed that he killed Jun because of the influence of Manny, but has also claimed he had nothing to do with the crime. He's claimed the trial was fixed, and he wasn't allowed to testify, despite him making this decision not to. However, what remains consistent is his insistence on portraying himself as having been an international model and a highly paid male escort. In my opinion, he's a man who will always be a danger to society, someone who has no real capacity to change, to actually drop the bravado and acknowledge and address the deeply damaged man that he truly is. If released into the community, I think Magnotta would kill again in order to regain the spotlight. However, from what I've read, it doesn't appear he's that bothered about being released, for one simple reason. which is the most perverse part of this case, because he got what he wanted. Luka Magnotta got the attention he always desired. He's had documentaries and books written about him. He's on Wikipedia. He achieved his objective, and I imagine he sits in prison now, feeling very smug with himself. In his twisted mind, he now matters. He's won. This is one of the most complicated cases I've covered, due to the psychology of Luka Magnotta. What do you think of my analysis? Who do you think he is? Please share your thoughts below. If you like the content, then please consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, but you can also send a one-off donation to support the channel by using the thanks button. Please like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.